Tisha B'Av, the ninth day of Av, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, a day reserved for lamentation, a day reserved for mourning. But there is another element of Tisha B'Av that is worth focusing on, which is, as the prophets describe, when Mashiach comes in the Messianic era, Tisha B'Av is going to become a holiday, a day of celebration. On Tisha B'Av itself, now, we don't actually say Ta'achnun, we don't say the confessional prayer, because when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a holiday. That element of celebration shines on Tisha B'Av itself. Talmud says that Mashiach, or at least the spirit of Mashiach, was born on Tisha B'Av, was born on the 9th of Av, that through that calamity, we see it not just as destruction, but as demolition for something brighter and bigger. What is our attitude toward Tisha B'Av? Other than just lamenting the past, how are we supposed to view the future? How are we supposed to build ourselves up? How are we supposed to remain strong in this dark exile and optimistic for a better and brighter future? I'd like to take us back to the very first Tisha B'Av calamity described in the Talmud that actually predates the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, predates the existence of the Beis HaMikdash. Let's go back to the book of Numbers. The Jews are traveling in the desert. They're on their way toward the land of Israel, and they feel that perhaps we should send spies to help us figure out the best entry point into the land of Israel. God says, you really need the spies? I'm telling you, I'm going to help you. Okay, if you want to send spies, send spies. Not necessary, but fine. And God gives the approval. Moshe handpicks 12 spies, one leader of each of the 12 tribes. They're not really spies, by the way, they're scouts. They're going to scout out the land. 10 out of 12 come back with a very negative report of the land, and they intimidate everybody, and they fearmonger, and everybody's all scared to go into the land, and they're all crying, and God says, you're crying for no reason? You had my word that you're going to go into the land. There's no real reason to cry. Now I have to give you a reason to cry. That is the day of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. That was the 9th day of Av, which many years later was going to lead to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Some explain, we cried for no reason, God gave us a reason to cry. When we celebrate for no reason and rejoice for no reason, God will give us a reason to celebrate as well. But here's the interesting thing. These 10 out of 12 spies, with the exception of Yoshua and Kalev, where did they fall short? Was it a bad hire? Do we need to talk to HR? They were supposed to represent the Jewish people in trying to get into the land, and they stuck in their own agenda, their own fears, and they intimidated and fearmongered everybody. Where did they get the audacity to do that? One way to look at it is perhaps it was a bad hire. Moshe picked the wrong people, but he picked the leaders of each tribe. He vetted them. These were righteous people. Where did they go wrong? These spies, 10 out of 12, saw their task going into the land of Israel and everything that is necessary to get into the land of Israel. They saw God's plan and vision for the Jewish people, and ultimately vision for humanity, as a task, something that needs to get done. And when our Judaism becomes a task rather than a calling, things get tough, we shatter, we crumble, we stick in our own agenda, and we change things around. In contrast to Yehoshua and Kalev, the only two spies that remained faithful and loyal to God, to them it wasn't a task, it was a calling. When our Judaism is a task, it's easy to get fragmented when it's difficult. When our Judaism is a calling, it's who we are. Nothing can change it. Nothing can undo our calling. Whereas I saw in a teaching from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, when our Judaism is pleasurable, ta'ama ki toiv sachra, right? It tastes good because it's good business, right? When our business is good, when our business is pleasurable, and our spiritual business is pleasurable, our mission from God is pleasurable. Ta'ama ki toiv sachra, lo yichbe belayla neira. So now at night the candle will never go out. When something is pleasurable and you enjoy it, because it's a calling and it's who you are, it's not just something you have to do, we have resilience. And even at nighttime, even during exile, even when things are difficult, and even when there's a lack of clarity, we have the resilience to keep on going forward. The message of Tisha B'Av, the very first Tisha B'Av that had taken place historically, is so that we don't crumble in the face of this darkness, but we actually continue to thrive even in the face of this darkness. How can we transform Judaism from just being a task to being a calling, from being something we have to do to being a deep part of who we are? It's a paradigm shift in finding ways to make our Judaism deep, make our Judaism meaningful. It starts with learning the inner depths of the Torah. It starts with learning about our souls. It starts with davening and becoming more soul-oriented. Because when we're more soul-focused, we're resilient. Because the body can easily crush and crumble. But the soul is strong. The soul is connected with God. When I think of being soul-oriented, when I think of being resilient, when I think of being calling-oriented, not task-oriented, I think of Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson of Lubavitch, the Frierdiker Rebbe. I recently read in his talks his description of coming to America for the first time. And he's on this boat ride, and it's after everything he'd gone through in communist Russia and all of the oppression and almost being life sentenced and imprisoned and all the difficulties. And he's on this boat, and he says he's scared, he's nervous. And he writes, what am I nervous about? He says, I'm not nervous about how I'm going to physically survive in the US. How am I going to sustain myself? I'll figure that out. God will help me. I'm not even nervous about how I'm going to survive spiritually, at least in the details of it. How am I going to figure out kosher food? How am I going to figure out a minyan? America did not have the Jewish infrastructure it has now back in the 40s, right? How am I going to survive not working on, how am I going to survive all the various specific challenges? He says, that's not the issue. He says, what's concerning me right now, what's eating me up right now, how am I going to transform America so America doesn't transform me? That's what he's thinking on the boat. Because to him, his God-given mission, which is illuminating this world, was seen as a calling, not as a task. And with that came incredible resilience. With Yehoshua and Kalev, the 2 out of 12 good spies, to them their Judaism was a calling, not a task. When we see our Judaism as a calling and not a task, if we can make that paradigm shift, if we can find it within our soul to enjoy our relationship with God, we can transform the world. We can transform the exile, and the exile won't transform us, and we'll truly celebrate Tisha B'Av as a Yom Tov, as our prophets describe. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.